The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
So after we do the Sluga Dog, and we talk a little bit about all conflict isn't bad, because you have to have some conflict in order to change and grow. You know, how is something ever going to get better if you don't say, well, this isn't right? And that's going to cause a little conflict. So it's not that conflict is bad, but it's the way that we handle it that makes it helpful or unhelpful. And so here's a story about, this is an Aesop's fable, about one way to handle what's not fair, which is what we set up in the other story. So once there was a rug merchant, and this is a long time ago now, before taxis and trains, he hired a donkey with a man who owned the donkey, who would lead the donkey to carry his rugs to a neighboring town where he was going to sell them. Now, the way between one town and another led through a sort of desert area where there was a lot of sand and scrub brush and a very bright sun. And after a while, they were hot and tired, and they stopped to rest. So the owner of the donkey sat in the coolest place available, which was the shadow. There we go with the shadow again. Yeah. The shadow of the donkey. Well, the merchant looked at the owner of the donkey sitting there, and he said, I paid for the use of the donkey for this time. Now, I paid for it, so that's my shadow for now. You get up, I'm going to sit down. And the owner of the donkey said, you paid for us to carry your rugs to the neighboring town, but this is my donkey, it is my shadow, and I'm going to sit here. And so the two began arguing, and the argument grew until it came to blows, and they were in the middle of a fist fight, and while they were fighting, the donkey ran away. That's the end of the story.
I would like to share a little old story from China, but it's also my own story. And for those of us who try very hard to please our parents. Once in old China, there was a young boy and a young girl who always loved each other. They lived in this little village way on top of a tall mountain. So they always loved each other, and they grew up together. When it was time for them to get married, of course, they wanted to marry each other. So the young woman went to her father and said, Daddy, I think I'm ready to get married. And you know who I want to marry, my sweetheart. We grew up together. Is that all right with you? But then her father looked down and said, No, my dear daughter, you cannot marry him. But why not, father? Because our landlord wants you to become the bride for his son. He owns all our land. I had to say yes. So now you must marry the landlord's son. Now when the young woman heard this, her heart was broken. She went to the young man she loved and told him the story. And the young man was so disappointed, felt so bitter. He decided to leave the village altogether. He would travel down the mountain to the big city and start a new life all by himself. So that night he left without even saying goodbye to the young woman. Well, he got in a boat and he rowed down the river. He rowed and rowed for 3 days and 3 nights. At the end of the third night, he was finally tired. So he put down the oar, he tied the boat to the tree on the shore, and he started to sing this little song that he and the young woman used to sing together. Bao ma liu liu de shan shan, gan din liu liu di chen yu. Then he thought he heard somebody singing with him. He said, my ears are playing tricks on me. There's nobody around here. Duan duan liu liu de chao zai, 간딘 류류디 젠요. But there was no mistake, somebody was singing with him. He got up and looked toward the shore, but all he saw was dark bushes. 유엘리안 wan 간딘 류류디 젠요. Then suddenly, the dark bushes on the shore parted, and the young woman he loved stepped out. Her clothes were torn in places. Her feet were bloody from running through the forest. Honey, what are you doing here? Dear, you are the one who I love. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Please take me with you to the big city. The young man's heart leapt for joy. He took her hands and brought her into the boat, and together they traveled down the river. Once they arrived at the big city, they settled down and worked hard, and in 5 years, they had 2 children. But during those 5 years, the young woman never wrote to her parents or corresponded with them in any way. Well, one day, the children came home and said, Mommy and Daddy, how come all the other children have grandpas and grandmas, but we don't have one? When the young mother heard the question, she started to cry. So the children went and asked the father, and the father did not know what to say. The young mother said, I have been completely away from my parents' love and kindness for 5 years. It makes me feel so sad and ashamed. Well, if that's the way you feel, why don't we all go back and beg for your parents' forgiveness? So this time, the whole family together traveled up the mountain back to their home village. Their hearts were heavy because they did not know what to expect. When they reached the home village, they went straight back to the young woman's house. But in front of the house, the gate, the husband said, why don't you all wait here for me? I'm going to go inside all by myself and ask for your parents' forgiveness. And he went inside and into the living room, and there he saw the old parents of his wife. The first thought that struck him was how much older they seemed since 5 years ago. Then he realized they had been crying. He threw himself on the floor and said, forgive me, father and mother. I ran away with your daughter 5 years ago. Then the old father of his wife looked at him in the most peculiar way and said, what kind of a crazy joke is this? Our daughter is right in this house with us, but she has been sick. She's been gravely ill for 5 years. She could not marry the landlord's son. She could not marry anyone. And now her life is about to end. The young man said, what are you talking about? Your daughter and your 2 grandchildren are waiting outside the gate. So the old father rushed outside the gate to see if his daughter was there, and there she was. Meanwhile, the old mother of the young woman rushed inside to the back room to see if her daughter was sick in bed, and there she was. But when this young woman in bed heard the story, she got up and she dressed herself in best of her clothes, and she put some makeup on. She looked real pretty, and she walked outside the house. And there at the gate, the 2 young women met. And smiling, but without speaking, they stepped right into each other's bodies and became one woman. When the 2 women became one, the family became one. The young family decided to stay in the village, and they all lived happily ever after.
I was commissioned by a school district around here for their Russian class to tell one of his longer pieces. And that's when I learned Ruslan and Ludmilla by Alexander Pushkin. So I'm going to give you just a fragment of that too, to get you into the framework of the story. A very brave and handsome knight and the people of Kiev hold off an attack. and he is a champion of that battle. He's not the only champion, which adds to the story, but he's the one that wins the hand of the king, and her name is Ludmilla. And so the story starts with the retreating army that has been defeated, and then this wedding scene of Ruslan and Ludmilla. And he carries her to the bridal chamber after the party, and that's the end of Ludmilla. They walk in the chamber, and magic enters the story. And Ludmilla is lifted out of the chamber and whisked away to no one knows where, which starts the long adventure of Ruslan and the other champions trying to find her. So I'm going to tell you where she was taken and put you there in the bedroom when she wakes up. So the last thing she knows is that her lover had carried her into the bedchamber. And now she wakes up in a bed, a marvelously comfortable bed with big, pushy pillows and the smell of lavender in the room and the light coming in, and she opens her eyes and has no idea where she is. She's never seen this room before in her life, but it is a very comfortable bed. And she reaches over for her husband, who obviously isn't going to be found because he's not there. She sits up on her elbows wondering, what is going on? Where is everybody? Where am I? And just then, the doors open, and 3 ladies in waiting walk in. She's used to ladies in waiting. She's a princess. They have water, they have soap, they have clean clothes for her and combs to take care of her hair. And they immediately start ministering to her, which she allows them to do because she's a princess. This has happened every day of her life. And then finally she remembers to ask them, where am I? Who are you? But they make no answer. I demand you tell me where I am. What is this place? But they make no sound. And just as quietly as they came in, they leave. They have dressed her, they have coiffed her, and they have left her. Well, she walks over to the door and takes the handle, but it doesn't open. And she looks around this room, and there are huge windows that are curtained. So she runs over to the first set of windows and opens the curtains and looks out onto a snowy wasteland. She's in Siberia. She's never been in Siberia before, but she's heard stories of Siberia with tall mountains and blowing wind and snow. She runs to go to the second window, and as she's on her way, she passes a mirror. She's a princess, and so she stops, and she admires herself in the mirror. Oh, what a beautiful gown. Didn't they do my hair nicely? Oh, I'm going to the window. And she goes to that window and opens it up and looks onto mountains. This is terrible. She runs to the next set of windows, looks back at that mirror to make sure the back of the dress looks just as nice as the front, and finds those windows too. And then she sees another door, a door she hadn't seen before. Oh, it's going to be locked, but it's not. She turns the handle, turns the other door, it's double doors, opens them expecting a wintry blast, only to be hit by the golden rays of the sun, and she is looking on a garden. A magnificent garden that goes on and on and on, and everything is in bloom. And the breezes carry the smell of roses. There is magic afoot. She walks out onto the path. Maybe I can find a stable and get a horse and get out of here. And she runs around in a great big circle and ends up back at the door. Well, that didn't work. What shall I try now? She sees another path that she starts down. This one takes her away from the castle. And tentatively, she walks down this path. And then she smells it. Oh, bacon, sausages. Someone's making breakfast. And she sees a gazebo. And under the gazebo, tables that are laden with fruit and food. Oh, it would be nice to eat this food. No, I've got to get out of here. I've got to get out of here. So she continues down the path, and it comes with a roar, the sound of water coming over a falls. And she walks out onto a bridge with a magnificent waterfall falling down and splashing, and then the water going under the bridge and continuing down. It must be going to the sea. And then she thinks, wouldn't it serve my captor right, whoever it is, if I jumped off this bridge right now and denied him his prisoner? And her eyes start to roll back in her head as if she's being mesmerized by the sound and the water. And then she says to herself, I'm very hungry. And turns on the path and goes back to the gazebo and sits down and eats a scrumptious breakfast. You can see she's a little fickle, but she is a princess. And so we must forgive her these traits. After her meal, she lays down and pulls one of the pillows that are laying on the benches, and she goes to sleep. And the story continues with her lover and his quests. But I'm going to leave you there.
This one comes from Eastern Europe. It's a tale of gypsies. And there is a very, very popular story that's worldwide called The Magic Box. But this one is not the same story.
Same title, different story.
Mm-hmm. Long ago, there was a young couple, a husband and a wife. They were gypsies, and they were so deeply in love. The hold of one another's hand sent light through each of them. To kiss was to know heaven. And they lived near a pine forest where it met the beechwood trees down by a stream. And this is where they spent their summers in a tent. And in the winter, there was a mill up on the hill, and that's what they occupied to keep the winds from them. And thus they lived happily for over a year, but there was no child coming forth. There was no child. And the woman, she would go out and collect the beech nuts, and her tears would fall as she saw the little string of ants with tiny, tiny bundles on their backs. Oh, look at you, the little bundles. You have the babies on your back. And she would see the chickadees feeding their young. Oh, you have the babies to feed. If only I could have a baby of my own. And she wept, standing before a large beechwood tree where she'd been collecting beechwood nuts. And of a sudden, a bowl on that tree opened like a window or a door. And there materialized before her a face so ancient she couldn't tell what it was, till its features became clearer, and brown, piercing eyes looked at her, and a soft mouth spoke. And there was silvery, streaming hair, like a river flowing down the back of a very old, wizened woman whose face was so deeply carved with wrinkles and whose skin was so brown that perhaps she was a living walnut. No, she was in a beechwood tree. And she spoke in a kind voice, "Why are you weeping, woman?" Oh, mother of the tree, I am so sad. I had the love of my life, and yet I'm not able to bear a child for him. Even the ants and the birds, they can have their children, but I don't bear one. Ah, cease your weeping. I will assist you. I will that happen? Listen to me. When it comes the next full moon, you know it is coming autumn, and there are pumpkins to be had. Make your beechwood necklaces, and you take some into the village and trade for a round, full pumpkin. You have some goats. You bring home the pumpkin. You open it. And then you fill it with the milk from your goats, and you drink it down to the last drop. And that night, be with your husband. And 9 months from that time, you will have a beautiful baby boy. Oh, I will do as you say. And she started to turn, but she says, wait, I have a gift for you. And she reached down in beside her, and she brought up a beautiful carved beechwood box that you could open and close. And it had a little opening in the middle of it. She said, take this box, keep it with you. When this child grows to be a full-grown man, when he is ready to take his way in the world, be sure he takes it with him. It will bring him good fortune. She took the box and she ran back to her tent, and she found her husband and told him all that had befallen, and they waited anxiously for that full moon. So he gathered wood and he sold it. She made beechwood necklaces, and that's how they kept themselves. And that full moon coming up, she took her necklaces into the village, and she found the most perfect round pumpkin, which she immediately traded for and brought back and did exactly as this woman had told her. Now, what I forgot to say is that Motoko was this spirit of the beechwood. She did tell her, my name is Motoko. And so she thanked Motoko and prayed that this would be so, and indeed it was. As the spring came forth into summer, there was born in that tent the most beautiful, bouncing baby boy, and they named him Baktalo, which means happy one. And so they took him to the stream, and they dipped him in. It was the gypsy version of a baptism. And Baktalo, he was named. And strong he grew, and happy, with snapping brown eyes and quick feet and a quicker smile and a big open heart. Now Baktalo had a special gift of speech and hearing with all the animals of the forest. He could understand badger and bear, bunny and bird. And he wandered in under the undergrowth and through the bracken and into the woods, and never ever got lost, for he was taught every pathway by his friends, the animals and the birds. Even the snakes were his friends. And it came to be, hard times fell upon the family, and hard times fell upon the village, and the people were not able to do much in the way of trading. Food was getting to be very hard to come by. Baktalo by now was 13 or 14. And thus it went for a few years where they almost froze up in the mill and began to take parts of the mill apart to burn it for heat. And Baktalo came into his 16th year. Things had begun to even out. Mama and Papa could make it on their own. And Baktalo said, it is time for me to go into the world. I must go explore by myself. I must find what is there for me. Oh, Baktalo. But his father agreed. And as he was packing his bag to go, his mother brought out the box. This was given by the spirit of the beechwood tree, who made it possible for you to come to this world. Keep it with you. She said it will bring you good fortune. Baktalo nodded and put it in his pack with all his other things and kissed his mama and his papa goodbye and headed southward through the forest. And he went, oh my goodness, a full league, 20 miles, before it was that he met an old badger. Baktalo, how nice to see you again. Come sit by the fire with me, said the old badger. Oh, I have news for you. What are you doing? I have gone to seek my fortune in the world. Oh,
I have even better news for you. Just south of here, 2 leagues hence, why, there is the tent of the Forest King. And he has put out a proclamation. His beautiful daughter will be given to anybody who brings forth and shows the king that which he's never seen, that which is new. I will be the one to do that. I'd go myself if I wasn't so old. Thank you, Badger, for this. And so they passed a wonderful night visiting and eating. And the birds went, and they led him through the shortest cut down toward the enchanted forest. The king of the forest, for he indeed had enchantment around his huge gathering, and the trees were as big as any Baktalo had ever seen. And he strode in with his walking stick, and it was eventide, and he came to the tent of the king of the forest, and he said, "Let me in, I want to see the king." And the guard said, "No. But it is my right to see the king. I wish to show him that which has never been seen before." "I'm sorry, but in the evening the king listens to the forest's murmur, and no one disturbs him. You must come back in the morning." Okay, so it goes. And so off he walked, and along the lake he heard splashing and giggling, and he crept forward, and there, bathing, was the most beautiful young woman he had ever laid eyes on. Her hair was shiny like a raven's, long down her back, and as she splashed, you saw her skin was so soft and beautiful, and her lips were red. He was in love, and yes, of course, it was the princess promised. Oh my goodness. He was certain that he would be the one to win her hand or her heart. And he went off into the woods to make himself a bed for the night. He tossed and turned. He was so excited to get to the tent in the morning that just after the king had his breakfast, Baktala was first in line. "You may enter." And in he went. And he bowed low before the king. And the king said, "Another one. I have seen so many young men come. I have had nothing to look forward to." "Oh, will not be so with me, sire." "Well, what have you to show me? What have you to tell me that's never been heard, or that which has never been seen?" "Oh, my dear king, only tell me where to go, or what to do, and I will bring that to you." "Fool! You are supposed to be ready when you arrive." "I cannot take this anymore. Lock him away." And so the guards dragged the very surprised Baktalo off to a large oak tree, at the base of which was a huge stone. It took 6 men to pull that stone back, and when they did, they threw Baktalo and his gear in under there and put the stone over it again. And there he was, in the dark, dank root system, in a small cave, cold and damp, wondering just how the heck he'd get out of here. What have I done? What have I done? And he sat there almost shivering when all of a sudden, soft sounds came next to him, and all of a sudden there were warm things cuddling against his legs, and moles were there. "Baktalo, we will take care of you. We will keep you warm. We won't let you freeze." And they gathered around him, and he sat there wondering what to do. "Oh, just stay close to us. We will care for you. Take your food you have from your pack. Eat something. Rest." And he fell asleep. And when he woke, he stretched. And he dug in his pack and found the wooden box. He took it out and he shook it and said, "A lot of good you've done me. Good fortune? I have no good fortune." When all of a sudden the box began to glow, and he sat it down before him, and out of that box rose the face and body of an old woman with a stream of silvery hair down her back, a wizened face, brown as a walnut and wrinkled as one, dark eyes that looked through him and said, "Baktalo, I am Motoko, and the spirit of the beechwood tree. It is I who helped your mother find your life. I did not lie when I said this box will bring you good fortune. Only do as I say. And she plucked 6 of her hairs and handed them to him. And she said, now string them across the opening of this box. And then she took his walking stick and she broke it down to about this size. And she said, here, string a hair, 2, 3, right here to make it strong. And then she handed that to him. And she said, hold the box like this. Now draw string across string. And as he did, he played a slow song, and the moles, they said, oh, Baktalo, oh, this is sad, we will cry. And they did. And then he played faster, and they started dancing, and then they started laughing. And while he was doing this, the most beautiful music was coming out and filling up the cave, and indeed out into the forest, so that the king ordered the men to open that cave. What is this you're doing? Where's this music coming from? Out, young man, come out! And Baktalo came forth, while Motoko disappeared. Do what you were doing before. And so we started the slow playing, and soon the entire crowd was weeping. Please, please, you must change your tune. And he speeded it up, and they began to dance, and then it began to play a very merry tune. And the king said, you have succeeded where others have failed. You will have the bride, my daughter. And so Baktalo's parents were sent for, and they came, and there was a wedding that lasted 3 days with much dancing and much music played by Baktalo himself. And my friends, this is how the violin came into this world.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round